The Bucks have the best record in the NBA currently, which means that naturally there is going to be lots of discussion around awards. ESPN just dropped their NBA MVP straw poll. All-star voting is now alive. We've got listeners asking about Defensive Player of the Year and all defensive teams. So we're going to get into all that. And then the Bucks road trip continues in Cleveland. Chris Middleton may or may not be there. What does that mean? We're going to talk about Bucks and the Cavs. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. My name is Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN. And alongside me from the Technical Foul podcast from Locked On Bucks, absolute fan favorite, it's fair to say, Camille Davis. For today's episode, that is brought to you by BetterHelp. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every single day. I mentioned this yesterday, but shout out to everyone that jumped in the post-game live stream, including Camille. A little bit late, Camille. You've got to work on that punctuality moving forward. But by the time we finished, we had 700 people that dropped in at some point in time, which is obviously a crazy number. We're going to continue to do that. And we know that Bucks fans get excited after a big win like that one over the Pelicans. So we're going to keep doing the live streams. We appreciate you jumping on board. But to be aware of when we're going to do it, jump on YouTube, hit subscribe, hit the little bell, which will give you a notification when we go live. And then we can roll from there. Camille, and tell you what, it was an absolute pleasure to see you in the comments there.
Yeah, I was watching the end of the Packers game, and then I just scrolled in my YouTube, and I was like, oh, Locked On Bucks, we're live show. I said, let me just jump in here really quick. And it was cool being able to jump into the live stream. So I'm definitely looking forward to being part of those, both in the comments and maybe some off day we can just do a live version when I'm on here.
Well, we should be doing that, and people were excited just to have you in the comments, by the way, Camille, as you saw.
I saw that.
So the Bucks beat the Pelicans. That's a good win. They're moving on to the Cavs. We're going to get to Bucks and Cavs, the injury latest in the lead up to that game. A little bit later in the show, we're going to talk about awards. Just briefly, as we're still excited about this Pelicans win, anything in particular you liked specifically about that win, Camille? And can I ask you, are you on board with me describing the Jrue Holiday, Brook Lopez, Giannis defensive trio as the defensive triangle of terror? Can we roll with that?
Defensive triangle of terror. That might be a little long, but I do enjoy the energy. I like the energy. I like the energy of it. Any Pelicans thoughts? I just thought it was a good game from beginning to end. I was curious to see how the Bucks would come out after getting embarrassed in Memphis. When you see the opposing team doing the wave with the crowd, you know how things have gone. So I was just looking forward to seeing how they were going to come out. They came out really on fire. Giannis had a very efficient game. He looked like he was fresh, springing the step. It was curious and interesting watching Jrue and Wes handle the Zion duties primarily. I didn't expect that going into the game, but it worked out really well. They game planned against Zion. They did not want Zion to beat them. If JV went and had a career night, so be it, but it was not going to be Zion. And it was interesting to me to see them actually game plan towards a player in the regular season as well. Again, showing that Bud can, switch it up a little bit. I know people don't want to admit that or hear that at times, but seeing him keying on Zion and making that the focal point of the defense was interesting to watch. And just overall, it was an enjoyable game. Watching the Bucks kind of take a lead from beginning to end. It never felt like it was going to get out of hand for the Bucks on my end. So it was a good game.
I agree. And Willie Green post-game, I was watching the Pelicans post-game this morning, and he discussed that idea that for Zion to have to deal with those guys on the perimeter that actually have the agility to move left, move right, stay in front of Zion, and then they have to deal with Brook Lopez coming over basically every time was a significant challenge. So, yeah, perhaps a little bit of a surprise, but I must admit, as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. If you've got the two big bodies on the perimeter, and even Wes, that didn't necessarily go well. He picked up the very quick fouls, but a lot of the times, if you're going to do that, the foul's going to be on the floor. If it's at the start of his move, Wes, you got 6 fouls, man. That's totally fine. So I thought overall, they did a really good job. And as we know, the Bucks 22-8 on the season, which means they've got the NBA's best record, which means that based on what we've seen in history, Giannis should be well and truly up there in the MVP conversation. Camille. Now, Tim Bontemps does his straw poll over at ESPN. I've got the results here as I pull them up on the screen. Now, this is with 100 media members that get to do the votes here. I did it. I voted in this. And as we can see, Jason Tatum comes in first with 47 first-place votes. Then you've got Giannis second, Luka Doncic, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic fifth, which is interesting. Only one first-place vote. And you got Ja and Kevin Durant and Zion Williamson. So, any surprises there, Camille?
I'm not surprised to see Tatum at the top. That makes sense to me, given the heater that Boston was on. I mean, their offense was running at a historic level for a brief period of time before they hit this little skid here. So that doesn't surprise me as much. I'm a little shocked to see Giannis over Luka, and not because I don't think that Giannis is having a better MVP season than him, but I felt as if a lot of the narrative around the season so far has been a lot of Luka, love, which he definitely deserves. I just haven't heard Giannis's name as much with national media as I have heard Luka's name being thrown out there. So seeing Giannis above Luka was kind of a pleasant surprise, but a little surprise for me with the straw poll, because I would have assumed that Luka would be second, maybe because of the Mavs record. He's a little bit lower than people thought, or that I thought he would be, but that's a surprise to me. Seeing that Jokic only got one first place vote after he's been a back-to-back MVP isn't surprising to me, because I saw that with Giannis after he got his second MVP, the narrative around the player changes a little bit. And although MVP is a regular season award, all of these conversations come in about the postseason and your playoff performance and clutch ratings and all that type of stuff. So knowing that Jokic getting 3 in a row puts him in some elite company, I figured that there would be voters who aren't going to vote for him. Although if you look at what he's been doing this season, like, he is definitely in this MVP race again. And some people might not want to hear that, but Jokic does things, and he's putting himself up there with Wilt Chamberlain type of numbers, which always sound fake. But when he had the game, was it 47 points, 25 rebounds, 10, like that's 2K numbers. Like, that's unreal. So I'm glad that he's in the top 5 at the very least, because he deserves that recognition at the very least with how he's been hooping.
I actually agree with pretty much all you said. I did the votes. So just for transparency, for the listeners of Locked On Bucks, so I did the votes, and we did do the voting on December 12, or that December 12 in Australia. So December 11 in the US was when I sent mine through. So just with the Tatum stuff, I think most of their losses, and again, it's only a couple of games, but most of their losses have come after that. No excuse in my opinion. But hey, I had Giannis number 1. I had Luka number 2. Tatum 3, Jokic 4, and then Steph Curry I had 5. And the Jokic point is interesting because, look, I felt bad putting Jokic at 4. He's probably having his best season so far. And I thought back to when Giannis had won 2 in a row and he was going for number 3. No one paid him any attention. And it does feel like that's certainly the case with Nikola Jokic, because it's just so difficult to win 3 in a row. And it's a regular season award, but people look at the postseason there. So Jokic, he's just outrageous, but it's difficult to see him winning this award. And I think as far as Luka goes, I mean, the Mavericks are just a very mediocre team at the moment, which is really hurting him. And Camille, Jason Kidd is starting to lose the plot.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought? It feels kind of familiar, where it's like you have a surprise season, you do well, and then the next year it's kind of like, what is happening right now?
But also, I will just say on the Giannis case, so we understand the numbers are crazy. We've spoken about the fact that, he struggled with efficiency outside the paint, which is not totally unusual, but he's been better, and the free throw stuff hasn't been great. Hopefully, it's on a bit of an uptick. Obviously, we saw him have the 17 for 22 night the other night there. But he also just deserves credit because of all the games that the Bucks' other players have missed. Justin referenced it, but I think the Bucks are still only behind the Orlando Magic in terms of games missed from rotation players. So that has to factor in. They've got the best record in the NBA despite all the injuries and the illness they've had along the way. So look, for me, I did have Giannis at the top, closely followed by Luka. I think it's a great point you make. I know Luka's going to be right there. If the Mavs start winning, they probably need to make a trade. I know Tatum, the Celtics we expect are going to be a really good team. So he's going to be there. I guess the question with Tatum for me is that half the time when I watch the Celtics, it looks like Jaylen Brown's their best player. So it's tough. They've got two guys that are very, very close to each other there. I want to talk more about Brook Lopez continuing to get the plaudits that he deserves. And then I've got a question on the rotation, and I'm just going through everyone we have on this show. I'm asking them the same question. So I'm going to throw that at you as well. But we have to say that today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And I spoke about BetterHelp at the top of this show, but we know there's not always a manual for life, Camille. And unfortunately, when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck, but people can help you out. There's no doubt about that. I've gone through this, and navigating any of life's challenges can make you feel unsure, whether it's a career change. That's what it was for me, a new relationship, or becoming a parent. It wasn't becoming a parent for me. So BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, accessible anywhere, and 100% online, which also is a big part of this, because sometimes if you're doing this thing, you don't want to be walking into a building, you don't want to be sitting in a waiting room, you don't want to see someone you know, that type of stuff. So BetterHelp, it's all online, which is great as well. So as the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 100% off your first month at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. Also, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast as well. Peter Bukowski will be there. He'll be in a good mood this week because the Packers did pick up a win. So listen to Locked On Sports Today. They'll have you covered with NFL, everything's going on in the NBA, and whatever else is happening in sports. I know MLB is going crazy, throwing cash around left, right, and center. So you can hear all that on the Locked On Sports Today podcast. And by the way, Bucks and Cavs on Wednesday nights. That's a 6 p.m. Central Time, so don't forget about that. But again, I've got a quota here to mention that the Bucks have the best record in the NBA. I have to mention it about 15 times per episode. While it's the case, it might not last forever, Camille, so you've got to make the most of it. But All-Star voting got underway, and it had me thinking. If the Bucks have the best record in the NBA moving forward for the next few weeks or whatever it may be, surely you're going to have a second All-Star. Surely. Mm-hmm. So I went back and had a look. Last year was Phoenix, and this is by the end of the year, so we know it can change. But Phoenix ended the year with the best NBA's record. They had Booker and CP3. Utah the year before had Mitchell, Gobert, and Conley, although he was a replacement player, I believe. Then you had the couple of years with Milwaukee with Giannis and Chris. And then you have to go back to 2018 where it was only James Harden with the Houston Rockets there. So I guess my question to you is, are the Bucks, in your opinion, going to have 2 All-Stars? Now, I know that's a pretty broad question, but I don't think it's a lock. But I think you can make a pretty significant case for one particular large man on the roster.
Yeah, going into the season, my initial prediction was that the Bucks would have 1 All-Star because at the time I didn't think that the Bucks would be a top team in the East. I thought they maybe finish around like that 3 spot. I thought that, regular season it was going to be like Boston for sure. I thought that Philly would look a little bit better than they have throughout the regular season. I mean, they've had some injuries, but they just come across to me as a regular season team. So I thought that, they'd be climbing up in the standings, but seeing where the Bucks are, what they've been able to do with Chris Middleton's injury on top of that, I definitely feel as if 2 All-Stars in this year's game isn't completely out of the question. So then you got to just kind of look around the league and it's kind of like, okay, well, who else could it be? We know it's probably not going to be Chris because of games missed. Jrue Holiday possibly could be. Depends on how he continues playing going forward if he misses too many more games after that. But I think the most obvious guy would actually be Brook Lopez. And in part too, because I feel like it's a little bit easier with the front court competition than it is for that guard competition, that backcourt competition that someone like Jrue would be facing in the East right now. So, of course, you got Giannis, you got Embiid. I guess you count KD in that front court player. Then you're looking at other guys like Brooks played better than I can probably say any other big really in the East at this point. Could you say Mobley? You could look at Cleveland, think about Jarrett Allen, but it's like,
come on, Camille.
I don't think they've been playing better than what Brook has been doing. So I think at this point, Brook should make the All-Star team unless something changes considerably in the East. I see a pathway for him, even if it's not directly outright in that front court spot. I could see him being a wild card as well for the coaches, just based on what he's been able to do defensively. And if he has some more games offensively where he has to step up and he's putting up these numbers, it's going to be really hard to deny.
Yeah, he would be a coach's favorite, wouldn't he? Because they're sick of this humongous lump of a human protecting the rim and swatting their shots into the third or fourth row. So, 2.7 blocks per game. That is, it says it's second, Camille, but he's played 29 games. Jaren Jackson Jr. has only played 13. I don't know what it takes to qualify, but you expect Jaren Jackson Jr., well, hopefully, will be healthy enough to be a qualified player. But so technically, Brook Lopez second in blocks per game, but we know he's been outrageous. I think he's had 6 or 7 games of 5+ blocks, which is just absolutely hilarious. And Frank is the guy that really gets on the stats guys, but it does feel like he's been ripped off a little bit as well in some of these games. But the offensive stuff, it's a great point that you make in terms of the expanded scoring. So he's up around 15 points per game, which is by far a high mark since he's been in Milwaukee. He's already had 7 20+ point scoring games this season in 29 games. Last year he had, not last year, sorry. The last year he didn't have that too many. I went back to the championship year where he played 70 games. He had 8 total. So he's almost reached that mark there in half the games. And we understand Middleton's missed games, Jrue's missed games. So we understand why. But he's definitely just, again, reminded everyone that he can be absolutely an offensive player and a high volume scorer in this league on when he's called upon. Jrue is interesting because he's played 23 games, so he hasn't missed too many. Certainly hasn't missed enough that you think he'd be out there. There's so many guards, but again, a potential coach's pick because they all love him. Well, they probably hate playing against him, but they all love him. But his scoring at over 19 points per game is the highest it's been since he's been in Milwaukee. His assists at 7.6 per game is the highest it's been in Milwaukee as well. So Jrue Holiday does feel, and both of these guys were last an All-Star back in 2013. I believe they were both an All-Star in 2013. So it would be just either one of them would be a ridiculous story. I want them both. I don't think we're going to go both. Jrue feels a little more likely as a guy that night to night, the expectations are a little bit higher, particularly on the offensive end. But I don't know, something about it. Just, Brook Lopez in the All-Star game would just be fun. He would be hilarious. I don't know. I'm torn. But I do think if the Bucks continue on this winning way, they deserve 2.
Yeah, I think 2 at the bare minimum feels right for this particular Bucks team. Who that second guy is, it depends on who the vote goes towards. Because like I mentioned, I just feel like when it comes to like that guard rotation, getting voted in outright, I know he's not going to be a fan vote. When you have somebody like, you got Harden, you got Kyrie. Although Harden hasn't played, he's going to get those fan votes. That's just how this always goes. You got Trey, you got DeJounte Murray now. You got Tyler Halliburton, who's come on really strong this season. I think he's had an all-star caliber season as well. You got Mitchell, you got Garland, you got that backcourt in Cleveland. Like there's a lot of guards here who are going to make a case for that all-star vote. And when you think about that fan vote, who those starters are going to be, I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if James Harden does make it as an all-star starter, although he's missed so many games, although he has not looked exactly like who he is, but that name recognition is a big part of that starter vote when it comes to the fans.
The other thing is Brook Lopez currently at just a tick under 40% from the three-point line. He would also be a hilarious three-point competition entrant just because I don't know whether he gets his shots up quick enough. Would this man be able to get through the 5 racks? I don't think so.
He'd be stopped on the 4th rack for sure. For sure. That would have to be like his money ball rack, the 4th rack or something like that, just to make sure that he's able to get at least a decent shot at finishing it.
Well, the other point is that we should point out, part of me feels like Brook Lopez, I don't know whether he would want it. I think he would want to just go, hey, I'm not going to Utah. I'm going down to Florida. I'm hanging at Disney for this 5-6 days we get off in the middle of the season. Don't even worry about voting for me. It'll be curious to know what he really thought. But either way, Brook or Jrue would be fun all-star nominations. Let us know in the comments what you think and who you think realistically could be in the mix when you put it up against the other players in the Eastern Conference there. Still going to get to this rotation question for you, Camille, and then we're going to talk about Bucks and Cavs, which again, we're talking about this schedule that the Bucks have, but this is two of the top three teams in the East, so it's going to be a fun game. So far, the Bucks have been able to handle the Cavs, but we'll see what this game brings up. But what about betonline.net? We've been talking about the MVP, potential defensive player of the year, and betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds for all those awards and keep track of the trends as it's going through the season for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football, as we spoke about, the Packers, mathematical, still a chance, Camille, postseason. Are we hanging on to hope?
Hey, there's a chance. I'm not hoping, but I'm aware there's a chance.
College bowl season as well. NBA. It says World Cup here, but we're going to update that. That's done and dusted. See you in 4 years. Although the Women's World Cup in Australia next year, that's going to be a whole lot of fun. So you can find out all about that at betonline.net. There's podcasts, all sorts of stuff on this website. It's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Bucks and Cavs already played twice this year. Twice in Milwaukee. Milwaukee won by 15 points. Last time they played, or one of the times they played, I can't figure out what date is what here. But I'll tell you what they did do. They absolutely obliterated the Cavs in the third quarter. So in one of these games, they outscored the Cavs 35-10 in the third quarter. The next game, they outscored the Cavs 34-18. That's probably going to get you a win. The Cavs are interesting, though, because they do have the tall players that you mentioned, Camille. But they're not. How do we say this? They're not thick. They're tall and slender, Camille, and I'm not sure that's the formula.
Against Milwaukee, probably not. But against a majority of other NBA teams, like that'll get you pretty far.
Yeah, right. Yep.
It's just that the Bucks have two really big body guys. I mean, Brook physically is a big man. Like just his body weight, he's hard to move. And then Giannis is one of the strongest players in the league. So he's going to try to come directly into your chest every single time. It's going to be shoulders into your chest. You're going to get some elbows, whatever the case may be. He is forcing his way to the rim. So if you're going to stand in the way, you're going to feel it the next day for sure. So looking at Cleveland, I know we beat them twice, but I also am aware that Cleveland plays a lot better at home. So I'm very curious just to see how they come out at home. I still am not sure exactly how they'll be able to stop Giannis and Brook. They've had some trouble with that so far this season. And I mean, Cleveland's going to be up to it because this is a team that views themselves as a contender. They view what they're doing as real. They think that they have a real shot out here. They understand who the Bucks are, where the Bucks rank, and they understand that those are the types of wins that you need to prove a point. So I think Cleveland's going to come out ready to play, giving it their all. If it's another blowout, I will be surprised. I would expect this game to be a lot closer because, again, Cleveland's at home for this one. They play better at home. It just tends to be a little edge for that home team there. But the Bucks should still win this game. Again, it's a tough stretch that they have here. Longest road trip of the season for the Bucks, I believe, right here. So leaving New Orleans, heading to Cleveland, got to get ready for that, and then keep gearing up as you get march towards that Christmas Day game against Boston.
And we should acknowledge in one of those games, Jared Allen didn't play at all. And in the other game, he actually only played 10 minutes or so. In one of those games, they kept Giannis to 16 points, but then he exploded for 38 in the other game there. Of course, for the Bucks, there's been no Chris Middleton. As I pull up the injury report here, so Chris Middleton, what was he listed as, Camille? You did tell me that.
Doubtful for tomorrow.
Tell you what, you don't see the doubtful a lot, do you? But yeah, Chris Middleton, doubtful for this game. Mamu and AJ Green with the G League team. As far as the Cavs go, it looks like most of their main players are going to be here to play. Dean Wade not playing. Dylan Windler, who, funnily enough, I actually didn't mind Dylan Windler leading into the draft, but looks like they're going to have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley there, so it's going to be fascinating. But with Chris Middleton unlikely to play, I think it's doubtful. It's officially doubtful. So he's probably not going to play in this game, which does open up the opportunity for Marjon Beauchamp to have another start, Camille. He's been pretty fun to watch over the last few games. And I've been asking people generally what their thoughts are on the rotation. We saw something fascinating yesterday with no George Hill playing minutes. Jordan Moore has obviously been out for a little bit there. But I'm curious to see where this Marjan stuff goes, particularly when Chris Middleton comes back to the lineup. It's interesting because when you look at the minute split, according to Cleaning the Glass with Grayson Allen, he's basically split his time between playing the 2 and the 3. Marjan's played about 78% of his minutes at the 3. Would he be capable of sliding to the 2? I'm not 100% sure, but it's just going to be interesting to see how this rotation shakes out. But the reason I love it is because when we were discussing all the Grayson Allen stuff, the trades, and I said, look, right now, it would be silly to trade Grayson Allen. You need to see how all the pieces fit. You need to get Joe Ingles back in this team and see where he fits among all the pieces here. So more than anything, you'd love for Chris to be able to get some continuity and some run with this team. But it is just exciting to see, as you pointed to at the start of this show, Bud trying some different things, maybe surprising some people with some of the moves that he's made.
Absolutely. And thinking about Marjan, when I turned the game on and I saw he was starting yesterday, I was just like, oh, okay. I was like, we get a Marjan start, which is cool. And in this time, I mean, I think he only took 4 shots last night. I think he was 2 for 4 when he finished, but he made good decisions. He just impacted the game in a positive way when he's on the court. The alley-oop that he had to Giannis was absolutely ridiculous. Loved every moment of that. But it's fun watching Marjan play. Every time I've been on this episode or this show and we've talked about Marjan and the Bucks rookies and things of that sort, I've made it very clear. I'm a fan of Marjan. I was a fan of him in the pre-draft process. Didn't really, I'm not a big college basketball fan unless I'm catching Marquette games or anything like that. And I definitely didn't watch a lot of G League games. But when you start going through that draft process and looking at players, like Marjan was somebody who seemed to have some NBA skills that could fit well on the Milwaukee Bucks. 6'8" guy, defender. So, that's the profile you're seeing. But what we've been seeing from him so far is that although shooting wasn't something that, he was being held as being great at, he's not scared to take those shots. He definitely is letting it fly. And he looks confident, even though it's not falling. I'm not sure what he's shooting at right now. I know he's been kind of up and down, but overall, he's looked a lot more confident shooting that shot than I expected him to, based on what his scouting report was. So I love being able to see any Marjan minutes. My hope was to be able to see a Marjan lineup with Chris, with Jrue, with Brook, with Giannis at some point. So I'm hoping that Chris can get healthy so we can see that for sure. But what Marjan's been able to bring is really interesting. And to your point about the wing rotation and the guard rotation, the Bucks really only have like 4 guards on the team. Really, you have Jrue, you have Grayson, you have Javon, and you have George Hill. So it's and there's a lot of wings on this team. So when you're looking at that, if Marjan is somebody who can slide down and play that 2 spot going forward, it might not happen this season because playing time, opportunity, such and such. But if that's something that he can project into doing well, splitting his time between the 2 and the 3, like that opens up his possibilities even more for this team.
No, it does. And it's a great point you make because, again, we go back to Boston. What do you need? Wings. But they've added Middleton and Ingles, who we think obviously definitely can play. And then Beauchamp as a wild card. Potentially you've added 3 lengthy guys. Now, I'm not saying you're going to throw Marjan Beauchamp out there and defend, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown in a playoff series. We don't know yet. But he's building, he's progressing. And it's fun to see. Let's get to the most important part of this podcast. What does the next few days look like for you, Camille? I know you're going to be inside, staying out of the weather in Milwaukee, but anything crazy going on?
Nothing crazy. Tomorrow's going to be like my busy day. I'm going to get my hair done, going to go grocery shopping, making sure I got everything we need in the house before this snow comes, and any last second Christmas shopping that needs to be done, grabbing a couple things there. Other than that, I will be inside on the couch, fireplace on, watching Bucks and Netflix and all kinds of shows that I've been meaning to catch up on.
That's absolutely beautiful. Marjan Beauchamp, by the way, 34% from 3, which is a decent number at this point. And yeah, he's a confidence guy, it feels like, but love the fact that he is not holding back. He's letting it fly. He's got a quick release and it looks pretty nice. So we'll see where that progresses there. All right, we'll be back for the post game tomorrow. Probably we'll be live, I will say. So make sure, again, you subscribe, you turn the notifications on. And let's face it, you've got absolutely no excuse if you live in Milwaukee because the weather's going to be absolutely terrible. Even if you've got the family around, I'm sure all your family, even if they're not basketball fans, would be absolutely interested in sitting down and watching a random Australian talk about the Milwaukee Bucks that they probably won't care about. But do it. Get people involved. Jump in the comments. Have a few beers while you're at it, if you like to enjoy a drink. And let's have some fun. Camille, always good to catch up with you.
For sure. And before we get out of here, I do want to shout out Frank. I had some Rocky Cocos today, and I thought of him as I placed in that order, and I was just like, a Milwaukee classic.
Well, I'm pretty sure Frank is about to make the trek back to Wisconsin, and I think he was trying to beat the weather as well, which it sounds like a lot of people are trying to do. So old Frankie boy, he will be maybe listening to this podcast as he's driving, and he will just go into a daze, start drooling everywhere, and potentially drive off the road. So, Frank, I beg you, please stay concentrated on the road. Keep your eyes peeled. You can have Rockies in approximately 48 to 72 hours. It's all going to be okay. But, the weather might make it difficult with the Rockies. But anyway, Frank will figure it out. He's an experienced campaigner. All right. We'll be back after Bucks and Cavs post-game show. Make sure you tune in.